Hey, this is another video by Pet Rock. I'm working on my wife's 98 Ford Mustang convertible. It's a 3.8 liter and I'm going to be replacing the rear lower and upper control arm bushings because the old rubber ones are shot. I'm going to be replacing them with a set of polyurethane bushings by Energy Suspension. So here's a look at the jack stands. I've got them connected I've got them mounted right next to the lower control arms mounting point on the frame. It's a double-walled piece of metal, so it'll hold very well. It also is out of the way enough so that the lower control arm can swing freely once I do unbolt it, and it won't be in the way. I've got the same on the other side if you look closely. Anyway, so I'm replacing the lower control arm bushings. I don't know if you can see it in the shot, but in my case, on this car, the rubber bushings are all cracked and corroded. So I'm just going to replace them. So I'm of the school of thought that if you're going to do a big job like this, which really isn't that big, it's not that complicated, it's just a little bit of a, you just got to schedule it correctly so you don't drop the rear end. But so I'm of the opinion that you do the hardest ones first. In this case, it's the upper control arms. Removing them is actually quite simple. It's getting the bushing out that's the difficult part. So you want to have as much room as possible. So you want to jack the car up as high as you can get it and as stable as you can get it, making sure that you chock the front tires so the car doesn't roll while you're working. Making sure you're on a level surface. You don't want this thing dropping on you. There's not a lot of ground clearance, and you easily get squished. First step is to remove the two bolts holding the upper control arm in place. After you've once with the suspension hanging freely. If you notice, the tires are not touching the ground. The only thing that's really holding it in place is the control arms and the shock absorber. Don't worry about unbolting the control arms and having the rear differential drop. The shock absorber is basically going to hold everything in place for you. But you want to do these things in pieces. So in stages. So you want to remove the upper control arm first, do its bushings, then remount it, then do the lower control arm and its bushings, and then remount it and tighten everything up. This is to make sure that the things don't wiggle or move while you're working on it. It's cramped space under here, so you don't want things dropping on you. That would hurt. Anyway, so I'm gonna get my tools. The upper control arms out. They were 18mm bolts. It was a little bit of a pain because as you undo the bolts, getting the nuts undone is fine. I was able to do it with just regular hand tools and big old wrench and a breaker bar. I'm lucky enough to live in an area where rust isn't really a huge problem. But if you do, then you might want to use some heat or something like that to loosen up the rust. A whole bunch of penetrating oil also would help. Anyway, so once you get them out, the differential will want to twist. It will want to. So if my hand is tips of my fingers are the front of the car or front of the differential, and the back of my hand is the rear of the differential. Once you let loose of this, once these control arms let loose, the front end of the differential is going to want to twist down. So that's going to put the the bolts into a bind. So if you just keep twisting them and or even prop up the front of the differential so it undoes the bind, you should be able to get them out no problem. Anyway, so the next thing I have to do is I have to remove this, remove the bushing material. There are a couple different ways you can do this. You could drill out, make a whole bunch of drill holes, and try to basically loosen it up and see if you can push it out. That to me is a bit of a pain because it just takes too damn long. Another way, which I haven't ever tried, but it theoretically would work, is if you had a hole saw that you can just attach to your drill and basically cut a big old hole through the middle of this thing and then push out the rest. But that'll leave a whole bunch of rubber material that you're going to have to get rid of anyway, and it is glued to the inside. This bushing is glued to the inside of this flange here, so you need to get that out anyway. And the only way to really do that is, the easiest way I've found to get this out as a unit is with heat. So I have a propane torch that I got from a local hardware store for, I think, I don't even remember, like 15 bucks, something like that. Most of it was for the hand piece. The propane itself, I've gotten refills for maybe 4 or 5 bucks at the same hardware store. Anyway, so you basically just want to stick the torch right here, or like basically right in the middle, and just hold it there for a while. You don't want the shell to start glowing hot. You just want it to heat up really good, and the heat will transfer through the metal into the bushing. And what you'll start hearing little pops and crackles, and maybe a little bit of whiffs of smoke coming out. That means that the bushing is starting to heat up. So you want to keep going until you start seeing rubber start to ooze out. It literally come out like a little like a Play-Doh, in those little Play-Doh sets back from the 80s. Anyway, so once you start seeing it come out, then just move to another section a little ways off. You just basically work your way around, just hold it here for a little while till it starts to ooze out. Then once it does, start holding it here for a little while till it oozes out, and just work your way around until you've basically loosened up all around the bushing. Once that happens, you should be able to press it out pretty easily from the opposite side. Term burning out the bushings, you're really not burning them out. What you're doing is you're heating up the outer shell, the shell that's around the bushing, to the point that it melts the rubber a little bit, or the glue and disconnects the glue, so that you can just push it out. You're not really burning it. You don't want to literally get it to the point of being on fire, because one, that's a fire hazard. Two, it's a whole bunch of this rubber smoke, the burning rubber. You don't want to breathe that stuff in. It's pretty nasty. Anyway, so you just want to heat it up to the point that it'll come out. So if you notice, this side is just slightly heated up, and it just slid right out. This side I heated up pretty well, to the point that it caved in a little bit. But to help it, you just drill out a whole bunch of holes around the casing, and that'll make it slide out easier, because it'll allow the rubber to compress a little bit more into those holes, taking up the space where the holes are. Anyway, another quick tip is that when you're cleaning everything up, this rubber is actually quite sticky. It gets on everything. One thing I found that helps remove it is a little bit of brake cleaner. So just some brake cleaner on a rag, and it'll wipe up. It may take a couple times, but it'll come up pretty nicely. Just be careful not to get the brake cleaner on the tools themselves, because, for example, on these Craftsman, brake cleaner will remove this blue and the red on it. So just try to get it where you need it. So now that I've got it out, the next thing you got to do is you got to clean out this bore. It's because it's got a whole bunch of residue from the old bushing. So I went out and got a 1.5 inch wire wheel for that I can attach to my drill, and just gonna go in here and zip it through and clean it down to where it's down to bare metal. You want to get it as clean as possible, so that the new bushing doesn't so that the old rubber doesn't interfere with the new bushing when you're trying to install it. So you can probably, if you don't have a wire wheel like that, it was literally $4 in my hardware store. You can probably do the same thing with like a hand wire brush, and just work it in, but it's just going to take you a lot longer. So I've got the wire brush attached to my drill bit. So basically, you just take it, and this is probably going to be harder for me to do with one hand, but I'll try to give a visual of how I do it. Until you got it, a little bit clean. It's not all the way done, but it's getting there. Anyway, so you just get it smooth. Once you got it all cleaned out, make sure you're wearing eye protection, by the way, because little bits of rubber are flying all over the place. So once you got it cleaned out and nice and smooth, you can start pressing in the new bushing. All right, so I'm ready to install the new bushings. So these are bushings made by Energy Suspension. I've greased them up a little bit with the supplied grease that came with the kit, and I advise putting on rubber gloves when doing this, because this stuff is sticky and it gets on everything. So just be careful what you're doing, and just take it and it'll literally just slide in. If you put on enough lube, you don't have to go overboard with it, but you put on enough lube, it'll just slide right in. Next thing you do is you take the centerpiece and you put a little lube on that as well. This is going to be interesting with only one hand. I've got a little bit of lube on the bottom of the centerpiece, the center shaft. Not even sure what you call it, just this thing. And so the next thing you do is put lube on it and you press it on in. It should again go in with reasonable hand pressure. There you go. I'll press that in a little bit further in a minute. And that's basically it. That one's almost done. Next part is with this kit, it comes with little, thrust washers that go on the opposite side of this. I've already set up one of them, one of the bushings like this. It's coming off a little bit, but I've already got it done. So this basically helps prevent the lateral movement of the while going in through turns and stuff like that. So you lube this one up as well on the inside. Again, you don't have to go overboard, and then it goes in on that side. It just goes on that side, and then that's it. So when you're about to mount everything up, you want to make sure that all the surfaces that touch metal are lubed up a little bit. So for example, before I install this, I'm going to put a little bit of lube around this edge, and as well as on the opposite side. And then the same thing on the bushings that are on the differential. You want to make sure that, otherwise you're going to get squeaks otherwise. So this is the driver's side of the differential. This is where the upper control arm meets the differential, and you have this bushing and this outer sleeve, this outer metal sleeve right here. You need to remove the bushing and keep the sleeve. At least with the kit that I have, the polyurethane bushing kit that I got from Energy Suspension, it doesn't come with new inner sleeves, or outer sleeves, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't come with any of these, so I have to reuse them. So I don't want to damage these. So to remove the bushing, I'm going to take my propane torch and heat it up around here, like I did on the control arms themselves. Heat it up until it starts to, so the rubber starts to basically melt, and push them out. So this is, again, is something, since you're right underneath the gas tank, you want to be very careful. If you smell gas at all, do not do this with fire. You do not want to light yourself on fire and cause all sorts of other damages. So if you do smell gas, fix the gas problem first, just to, cover your own butt. Anyway, so next I'm gonna burn out these bushings. Okay, so I've got the bushings installed in the upper control arm as well as in the diff. There's the differential bushing. If you notice the right side, that's the thrust washer that comes with the kit. You need to lube that, as well as the sides of the bushings, and the inside of that thrust washer, because it's touching metal. Again, anything touching metal, you need to put lube on to lube it up, and then put everything back together again. Now you might notice that the upper control arm does not line up at the moment. That's because the differential has spun forward. So it's, instead of being level like this, it's actually twisted forward. Because we removed the upper control arms, the differential has moved. So in order to line them up, you need to put a jack underneath the differential, the front of it, so that to line things back up again. If you notice, it's starting to move into place now. So once you got it lined up, just put the it's gonna fall right into place. Yay, gravity. Anyway, so once you've got it lined up, you just put a bolt through it. You don't want to tighten them down right now. We want to get everything done, all the bushings done, before tightening everything down. You also need to tighten everything down at ride height. I'll show you how to do that later. But right now we're just going to put a bolt through and put the nut on finger tight. Okay, now we start on the passenger side lower control arm bushings. So first thing you got to do, obviously, is take the wheel off. Then once you do that, you raise the rear differential on the passenger side, in this case, up slightly, and then you support it by the shock absorber bracket with a jack stand. The whole point here is you don't want the support to be from the you can support it from the axle tube if you want to, also if you have a jack stand high enough, but in this case I didn't, so I put it here. Anyway, so what we're gonna do next is we're gonna undo this bolt here, and then once we do that, then the lower control arm is going to be free. To prevent the lower control arm from just shooting down because of the spring, you want to have a hydraulic jack underneath it to take the pressure, so then you can slowly lower it down without having the spring shoot out at you and hit you in the face and kill you. So anyway, so I have that set up right now. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove that bolt and lower the lower control arm out of the way. You want to remove this bracket right here, because you don't want this cable and this other wire, which I think goes to your anti-lock brakes, to get bound up when you actually lower the control arm. So if you just put a little bit of silicone lube on this rubber bit, it'll come out, it'll slide off pretty easily, and this is a 13mm bolt. I'm ready to lower the lower control arm. Notice this bracket's off. It's got one of those little, not sure what this thing's called, but it goes on the inside of the lower control arm. So I'm a fan of keeping nuts and bolts together once you take them off, so I just put it back on here and it'll hold there for a minute. So now we're going to lower the lower control arm, and you want to do this very slowly so that the spring is under some extreme pressure. You don't want the spring flying out, and it just falls out when you lower it slow enough, like that. So you just want to keep it going low, and then you're done. So here's the lower control arm out of the vehicle. So one thing I wanted to point out that I noticed was that if you look closely, the distance between the middle sleeve and the outer sleeve on the bottom is longer than on the top, and that's because over the years the rubber up here has squished, and the rubber down here has stretched. It just happens over time. Rubber will collapse with pressure on it for so long, from the weight of the car and everything like that. Anyway, so I just wanted to point this out. It's a common problem with rubber bushings that happens over time, over a long period of time. And because it has stretched, this is an indication that the bushing is shot. Even though it appears to be okay, it does need to be replaced. So with the lower control arm, I had a little bit of the smaller of the bushings, I had a little bit of trouble getting it hot enough to get the bushing out, to be able to push the bushing out by hand. So what I did instead was I used a ball joint press that I had rented from a local auto parts store locally. It's part number, I don't know if you can see that, but it's OEM, made by OEM. I got it from AutoZone. Part number is 27023. Anyway, I just hooked it up onto my vise, and because it was easier to balance that way, and just turned it until it popped, and it popped. So I wanted to show that because someone might find that helpful if they don't have the physical strength or weight of their own body to push these bushings out. You might be able to use a ball joint press. They have more than one use. So this is as far as the ball joint press was able to get it out, because the adapter I had isn't long enough. However, it gets a pretty good way out, as you can see. So one thing I have to note: in order to use the ball joint press, you still have to heat up the bushing, the outer shell of the bushing, enough to melt the bushing, but you don't have to do it as much. Because the press will be providing all the force. If you don't have a press, or your local auto parts store doesn't have one, then you're gonna have to heat up the bushing a whole lot more to make it liquefy, so that you can push it out by hand. So anyway, I just wanted to show this. So now that I've got it out this far, I can use a set of vice grips and just pull it the rest of the way out. So I finally got the oblong one out. This one was a pain in the butt. I was able to get, if you look closely, I was able to get that side and that side and that side with the torch, and heated up to the point of starting to melt and ooze out a little bit, but the bottom couldn't really get good access to. So what I ended up doing was I ended up drilling 4 holes with, I think it was a 1/2 inch bit in 4 spots. So on the left side right here, there's a hole that actually is from the factory. It's like that, and that's actually facing the back of the vehicle. There's a hole on the front side right here, corresponding area. There's actually a metal rod going through that part. So make sure you don't hit that with your drill bit like I did. Anyway, so the metal rod is probably there to stiffen up the front side of the bushing to handle, I guess, compression. Not really sure what it would be for, but it would basically be to handle some kind of compression, but I'm not sure what motion that would actually cause that on the vehicle. Anyway, so I drilled these 4 holes and heated up as much as I could to the point where it started to melt. So the bushing started to melt and ooze out, and then I had to jam a small screwdriver like that one around the edges, working my way all the way around. Yeah, working my way all the way around. Until all the glue on around it had let loose, and then I just started prying on it until I finally got it out. I didn't have a coupling this size for my ball joint press, otherwise I would have used it. Anyway, so yeah, get it out however you can, whether you burn it completely out and inhale all those nasty fumes, or you melt it as much as it is till it'll start to ooze, and then try to pry it out like I did, or if you try just hack the crap out of it until you get it out. Whichever way you do it is the way you do it. Just make sure that you don't damage the outer shell. And now that I have the bushing sleeve cleaned out, is if you notice there's a little bit of a lip on the right here, where basically this side of the bushing sleeve is wider than the opposite side. So if you're going to be pushing these bushings out, you want to push from the opposite side towards you. So you want to put so the bushing will come out this way. Otherwise, you'll be working against yourself, because this end is narrower. So you'll be compressing the bushing as you're pushing. If you push it this way, you want to release the bushing, so you want to push it this way. So I'm ready to install the front side bushing on the control arm. This one for this hole, this one here. So basically the way I do it is you don't need to slather the grease all over it. You just need to get it on the front edge, you know, like that basically. And as you press it in, the sleeve itself will draw the grease the rest of the way down. With this long of a bushing though, you might want to put a little bit in the middle, just because in case you don't put enough on top. But you just basically make a ring and then press it in, and you should be fine. So yeah. So this bushing is ready to go. I've got a ring of grease, a liberal amount of grease on around the top. And then I put a little bit on in the middle, right around the lip, just for good measure. So like the previous one, you just basically put it in. You put it in like that, making sure that the lip side of the bushing goes on the lip side of the bushing sleeve, and then you just press it in. If you notice, you can see how the grease, as I'm pressing it in, is getting drawn. It's getting hard with just one hand, but you can see how it's getting drawn into the drawn towards the remainder of the bushing. So you're coating it as you press it in, just like you do with like a set of spark plugs. You just put a little dab of anti-seize on the end of the spark plug near the spark plug electrode, and then as you screw it in, the anti-seize will get drawn onto the remainder of the threads. It's the same principle. Okay, so the bushing's in. You can see the excess grease has oozed its way out. So what I like to do is I just take the excess, wipe it off with a finger, and apply the excess to the end of the bushing, the new bushing inner sleeve. not really sure what this thing's called, but the little tube. Anyway, to take the excess and use it on that. My kit came with a huge old tube, tub of the grease, because I got the master kit for the car, so it's every bushing on this car is going to be replaced with polyurethane. So it brought a big tub. Plus, I had some left over from doing the bushings on my Durango. Anyway, so you don't want to run out of this stuff. They don't give you enough to do the job. So you might have to, when you buy your kit, you might have to buy some additional if you don't get the master kit, which comes with this tub. Anyway, so yeah, you want to apply a little bit around the tip here, and then just press it in by hand or with a vise or whatever it is you want to use. Just the same effect of just putting a little bit on the ring and on the tip, and as you push it through, the grease will get drawn throughout the rest of the metal. So my kit came with a new set of insulators, polyurethane insulators, to replace the cracked and brittle rubber ones that were stock. So one quick tip on how to keep the insulator on the spring as you're trying to get it into place. Just take a little tape like that and just tape it on just a little bit, just 2 spots should do it. And then as you're trying to wheel it in, it won't fall out. So I hope that helps. So I've got the lower control arm in, and a new insulator bushing on the bottom, and the one on the top that I taped onto the top of the spring. I have it held up with a floor jack right now, and you might come into the same situation that I am right now, where the bolt doesn't line up. And the reason for that is, if you look closely, I don't know if I can get that in frame, but like previously when removing the upper control arms, the front differential has tilted downward, so the front has dipped down, and that has moved the bolt hole back a little bit. So to correct this, you set up a second floor jack on the front nose of the differential to push it back up again, and that should make this swing this way so that the bolt hole aligns. So if you watch as I jack it up, the bolt hole is swinging forward, and that's as far forward as it's going to swing. So now I have to raise the other floor jack up to make the bolt holes line up. I'll get some light on that. See if I can get it in the picture. So if you notice, the lower control arm is lower than the bolt hole. So now I just need to raise it up a little bit to get it to line up. And so I'm going to go off camera and do the rest of this. So I finally got the bolt in after a lot of wrestling and finagling with the silver jack and the red jack, raising and lowering so that to make the bolt holes line up. You know, I finally got it in. Took a little bit of wrestling, but I got it. Anyway, so I have this jack stand right here, propped or underneath the frame, or underneath the differential, so just in case one of these floor jacks happens to fail, the car doesn't drop on me. So safety first, you know how it is. Anyway, so next I'm going to put a little bit of anti-seize on the end of this bolt. I've been doing that to all the bolts in this suspension. So it's basically a force of habit. It's not in this area where I live. There's not a really big problem with rusting, things rusting like it is like in the Rust Belt, for example, where you just breathe on something and it rusts. Here it's not that bad. It's not as humid, but I have lived in areas like that, and over the years I've just gotten into the habit of putting anti-seize on any bolt that is exposed to elements like this one. It makes it for easier removal later if I ever need to take it off, and you know, it's just annoying to deal with rusted out bolts. So just you know, as a future precaution, just to help yourself in the future, put some anti-seize on it. If you just put a little dab on the outside, on the tip, so to speak, you can, and then once you thread the bolt down or push the bushing in, it'll the act of doing that will draw the lube or the anti-seize in this case around the rest of the bolt. So I just have a little bit on the tip of the bolt, not all the way around, and so when I thread this on a little bit, the act of actually threading it, here, I'll thread it off now so you can see, the act of threading it will apply the anti-seize. Let me get a picture of that. There you go. We'll apply the anti-seize to the rest of the threads, so you don't have to coat the entire bolt. Just a little dab on the tip, and then thread the bolt down, and you're good to go. I mentioned earlier, you don't want to tighten these bolts down all the way right now. You want to hold that off until the end. That'll be the last thing you do. Otherwise, you'll put the if you tighten the bolts down now while the suspension is at full travel, once you put the once you put the wheels back on the ground, you're going to make the suspension twist, and you'll put the bushings and the suspension in a bind, and that's where you get those squeaks and those weird noises and pops and whatnot. So you wanna keep the bolts just finger tight. This one's actually not even close to being bolted down yet. It's not even touching the bolt nut here is not even touching that yet. So that the suspension can still move. It'll so once I lower everything back down again, I'll tighten them all up. The other added benefit of not tightening all this stuff up yet is it allows the suspension to move a little bit as I'm trying to wrestle everything together. I still have the other side to do. The other lower control arm on the driver's side to do, so I don't want everything all tight and immovable. So yeah, lower control arm is all bolted up. I made sure that before I pushed everything together, I made sure that the spring was in the same general location as it was before I took everything apart. So this the bottom tang on the end of on the bottom of the spring, if you can see it, is pointing in the same direction that it was, the general vicinity of the same direction that it was. Doesn't have to be exact, just close enough. So now once you got that, then you just need to, then all that's left is just bolt this bracket back up again, slide this piece into here. A little bit of silicone lube will probably help make that slide in a little easier, and then move on to the next side. And the other side is pretty much identical to the driver's side is pretty much identical to the passenger side. The thing I suspected would happen, but I was hoping you would be able to wiggle it out, is that the bolt for the driver's side lower control arm on the frame side is hitting the muffler. So I can't easily pull it out just straight out like I could on the other side. To remedy this, you just unbolt the front part of the exhaust where it meets after the Y pipe, at the end of the Y pipe, and that'll give you enough clearance. The bolts, the nuts here are 14 millimeter. I had mine this exhaust off within the past 6 months, and so it was coated, had a nice good coating of anti-seize, so it wasn't that hard to get off. But if yours have rusted up a little bit, you might want to use a little bit of heat and or impact wrench or a whole bunch of anti-seize to get these off. They do tend to rust up. Anyway, so once you have it off, I have this staged already because I already did it. Once you have it off, it'll drop down, and now you have plenty of room to remove the bolt. So I'm all done as far as installing the bushings and the control arms go. Nothing's tightened up yet. You need to put the vehicle at normal ride height, which basically just means put the weight of the vehicle on the suspension. So the way I do that is I just use a set of ramps, just regular ramps, on each wheel. So now the suspension, the springs, and everything like that is holding the weight of the vehicle. You could also, if you have really tall jack stands, you could put jack stands here and here to hold the car up. However, the jack stands that I have, they are actually like an inch or two short. They would actually put the car about an inch or two lower than these ramps would, so I'm using the ramps. Anyway, so the next thing you need to do is you need to start tightening things down, start tightening the bolts down. So I would start with the ones in the frame first. Start with the one, the upper control arm bolts and nut on the frames first, and then do the differential. There really is no real rhyme or reason to it. It's just whatever makes it easier for you. But I'm going to do the inside, the upper control arms first, and then do the lower control arms. So I'm under the passenger side of the car. This is the passenger side upper control arm. So I've already tightened this bolt down. The torque spec is 73 to 97 foot-pounds. So put it somewhere in the middle, you got about 86. Anyway, 85, 86. So that's what I'm putting mine at. Anyway, so just you want to have on the upper bolt, you want to have the nut facing outward. On the lower bolt, down here, if I can get it on camera, the lower bolt right here, working blind at the moment. The lower bolt down there, that one's at that one you want the nut facing inward. On the lower control arm, both nuts face outward. All the bolts have the same torque spec, 73 to 97 foot-pounds. So just tighten them all down. Once you have the suspension at its ride height, you do want to bounce the suspension up and down a couple times just to get everything settled, and then tighten everything down. So now that everything's bolted up and torqued down to the proper torque specs, don't forget to reattach the exhaust. You need to leave the exhaust muffler hanging down so you can get clearance to install the bolt and get your wrenches and stuff like that in there, your torque wrench and whatnot. Anyway, so the nuts are 14 millimeters, and if you I'd advise putting a little bit of anti-seize on there. Just do yourself a favor. Anti-seize or high temp anti-seize, silver or copper should do, or some transmission fluid will work, regular gear oil will work, regular engine oil will work, just a little bit, something to coat the threads to help prevent rust, because these things tend to rust up pretty good due to condensation and all sorts of other things getting on them. Anyway, so the torque spec is 23 to 29 foot-pounds. So I just cut that in half, and you got 26 foot-pounds, and that's what I'm going to be setting mine at. You want to try to get them on as evenly as possible, so like spin one side down and then the other side, just alternate back and forth to try to keep an even pressure on it, and then torque it down. Okay, and then pretty much you're done. Okay, so she's all done. Got her back on the ground. So tightened down all the bolts. Everything's good. I bounced the suspension a few times. No weird noises or clunks. Seems like I'm pretty much set. So now I'm just going to go take it for a test drive. So I hope this helps somebody. That's basically why I made this video. I only saw on YouTube at least one or two how to do these kind of bushings on this kind of vehicle. And while they were helpful, I figured I would want to go in a little bit more in depth. Anyway, hopefully this helps somebody out. This is my, I guess, second video that I've ever made on YouTube. So hopefully you aren't too annoyed by the camera work. I'm not a professional photographer, nor am I a professional mechanic. I just do this stuff in my garage on my spare time. Anyway, so hopefully this helps somebody out, and see you around.